Thanks for joining us. It is great to be here at JFF Horizons. The conversation we're having is about bringing together different stakeholders, different sectors, education, workforce development, corporations, government, entrepreneurs, investors, everybody to solve what I think of as really the intractable problem of our time. It's not really unemployment, because we managed to get unemployment pretty low in this country, and we will do so again. It's the idea that people have quality work for which they are properly trained, for which they can earn a livable wage. So it's fixing how we train, how we educate, how we employ, how we resource, how we recruit people. And we've got three members of President Biden's cabinet who have come together to join us for this conversation on the future of learning and work. And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about them. I want to spend time talking to them. We've got the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona. He's joining us. The Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh, and the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo. I want to welcome all three of you. What a great opportunity for us to have a conversation with you about such an important and such a current issue. And let's get right to it. Secretary Cardona, let me start with you, because no conversation about properly equipping a workforce and having a workforce that prospers can start without understanding an education system that figures out how to educate people to be employed meaningfully. How do we do a better job of connecting education to work and to regional economies around this country?
First of all, thank you for having me, Ali, and great to see you and my colleagues, Gina and Marty. Glad to be with you today. And I look forward to our work together. You know, I firmly believe a good education system is your best economic driver in our country. And, the president gets that. The president is committed to partnerships between education and the business world and commerce to make sure that we're able to do that at scale, right? And that means including our workforce partners. That means including our pre-K-12 systems, our higher education systems, our unions, our labor. It just really, we need to work together. We need to plan together. I envision there being better through lines between our middle and high school and our 2-year, 4-year programs, our credentialing programs. I look forward to having partnerships where we have our workforce partners at the table helping us plan what it might look like. And we need to do this because we know that there's so many of our students that are in school not sure what to do, and we're not capitalizing on that. So what I hope to see is an evolution of our college and career readiness programs to include pathways to so many more careers and so many more opportunities for our learners. That's what I envision in the short term, working with my colleagues across the table here.
And I know that you three are relatively new to your jobs and maybe haven't had enough time to mix it up with each other, so feel free to do that here. This is there's no formality to this discussion. Secretary Walsh, it's good to see you again. How do we talk about workforce training, right? Some of it is what Secretary Cardona talked about, the education system as we know it. But we have a different issue as well. We've got people who have either been in the workforce, gone to community college, gone to a university. They're trained for something, but it's not always as dynamic as the economy is. So how do we match those two? How do we ensure that we are preparing and constantly shifting around our workforce to fit the jobs that we have available and the needs that we have as an economy?
Well, first of all, again, thank you as well for having us today. This is a great conversation with my two colleagues. We've had indirectly, as I mentioned off air, this conversation a little bit before this show today. I spoke with Secretary Raimondo, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary Cardona, Secretary of Education, and Secretary of Labor. How do we spend the money that's most impactful, that gets to the street, gets to people, and then gets them to the jobs of the future? I spent the last 7 years as mayor of Boston, and I saw the tech industry kind of grow in the last 7 years, kind of really in a big way in Boston. And one of the things that the companies I spoke to were, they're worried about supply of workers who are prepared. And when I think about workforce development, the Department of Labor, even before the American Jobs Plan, it's really making sure that we're talking to business, we're talking to nonprofits, we're talking to educators, we're talking to labor unions, and how do we set up an agenda or a curriculum, I guess, if you will. How can we spend the money so that this money can go to a job training facility or program and directly impact somebody's potential to get a good paying job? And that's kind of the core of what President Biden's talking about when he talks about the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan, but in the Jobs Plan making even larger investments. we really have to start thinking outside the box. COVID has, in Boston, speaking for Boston, in Boston, when we talked about coming back from COVID-19, we realized that there's been a lot of disparities. People of color, the unemployment rate in the black community in Boston higher than double almost of the white community. You look on a national average, the numbers came out the other day, the unemployment rate for the black community in the country is almost double that of the white community in the country. So we have an opportunity to really think about build back better, build back stronger, and use more precision about how do we make these different investments. So we have a unique and huge opportunity in front of us, and we can't let this opportunity go by the wayside. This is a chance for us to really, when the president talks about building back better, actually strengthening and rebuilding, if you will, the middle class that has been kind of missing in this country for a long time.
And Secretary Raimondo, you have experience both in business and as the governor of Rhode Island. I did a story a few years ago on how the airline industry was lacking mechanics. So they went to a number of community colleges around the country and said, we'll give you the airplanes, we'll give you the parts, we'll make videos for you, we'll do everything we can for a pretty good job. I mean, after a few years, you'll be earning six figures and great benefits. They just couldn't get enough people to train for it and do it. So they said, let's go out there. And pretty much everybody who went into one of those courses at the time, there must have been 40 or 50 community colleges involved, would come out with a good job if they wanted it. How do we do more of that? What does the public-private partnership part of this look like?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and it's great for me to be here with my colleagues. So we do that. I mean, that model that you just said, that's the winning model, and now we have to scale that. And I know Miguel and Marty have each done that in Connecticut and in Boston. It's certainly the focus that I had in Rhode Island. And so now the three of us have to get together. By the way, the fact that we are together doing this with you and doing this in concert is a big deal. Yeah. This hasn't been the way that the government's done this in the past. Labor does its thing, and education does its thing, and commerce is off with business. That's old-fashioned. That's not going to work, right? Business has to not just be at the table, has to lead, like the airline led in that example, have to step up and lead. And so and we three cabinet secretaries, we're going to set the tone at the top to say we are collaborating completely, and we're going to meet the needs of employers and kind of tailor the job training efforts, whatever that might be, the K through 12 system, community college, like you said, credentialing, so that everyone gets a job. I don't even like calling it, job training. I like it's jobs. The point of this is getting people jobs. Right. What will that take? A certain amount of credentialing, training, support services. So, I have religion on this topic. I've seen it work in Rhode Island. There's nothing better than seeing a young person beaming with pride, telling you that I'm the first one in my family to get a quote unquote real job, because I have a real job with benefits, because I went through this career and technical education effort. And, I know Marty and Miguel agree. We're going to get this done at scale.
Secretary Cardona, one of the things that you had to deal with and think about in Connecticut was the idea that Secretary Walsh pointed out when he was the mayor. He understood that these things don't affect communities the same within a state, across state lines, across socioeconomic lines. What can you do? What part can the Department of Education do about creating sort of the bedrock, the underpinning of choice for people in the future, the choice to go to a community college, to go to university, to learn a trade? It's all based on how well we can do in our public education systems.
This is exciting. It really is. What an opportunity for our country, And then when you have the American Jobs Plan that puts up $48 billion for workforce development, the American Family Plan that talks about 2 years of community college, the urgency and the direction is there. We just got to get it done now. And I'm looking forward to this. But what it means is that we change our mindset, right? We change our mindset. We're connected. We have our ears connected to what the needs are. We're sitting at the table to plan programs with our workforce partners, with our labor partners. This is really an opportunity for us to think forward and say, what does this look like at the federal level? And the fact that we're on this show, as Gina pointed out, we're signaling we want this to happen at the states. I was fortunate to be a part of a team in Connecticut where we had legislation being developed, where we had business leaders at the table, college presidents at the table, myself as a commissioner, and we were having these conversations, and then we were asking our superintendents, do this in your local community. Because as you know, many of these jobs are regional, right? So we need to create a mindset where we're listening, where our schools are designed. And with the American Rescue Plan, there's funds now where you can design your schools to have career coaching, career development planning, and make sure you have curriculum and syllabus and pathways that are relevant to what the needs are today. There's a lot of potential here, and I'm excited about getting this going off the ground.
Secretary Walsh, we have people listening to this who come from across the country, from diverse sectors. Some of them are in education, some of them are in philanthropy, technology, business, finance, workforce development. What do you say to them as they go back and they work in their communities to support workers and learners, especially those from those underserved systems that you've talked about? What should they be thinking about in terms of moving this forward, getting Americans properly employed at sustainable wages?
Really intentionally working with the Chamber of Commerce's, the nonprofits, the job training facilities, the VOTEC schools, if there's high schools in the region, with the community colleges, particularly if there's community colleges in the region, and lend your expertise, your knowledge, your education to the system. This is potentially once in a generation opportunity that's in front of us right now. And having the best and brightest people who truly care about this issue and truly want to make a difference, want to close racial gaps, create opportunity for wealth. It's time now for you to help us and to do this. You know, this money will come from Washington and will make its way down to the states and make its way down to cities and towns and counties all across this country. But when you find out you have dedicated people in those regions all across the country that truly want to make a difference for people, you can make that difference by making sure these programs work. That's going to be the key here. It's going to be, you know, the money obviously at first is going to be key. The American Jobs Plan, passing it's going to be key. But once it gets passed, having real dedicated folks in the city of Boston. One of the things that we did when I became mayor is we strengthened our Office of Workforce Development. We added a component in there for financial literacy and helping people build their credit, helping people understand the importance of filing your taxes. And what that did was allow people the opportunity to have more money generated into the economy, but they were on a pathway to buying a home. So this is as much about education as it is about creating opportunity. And I agree with Gina 100%. These I should have said it that way. This is not job training programs. These are jobs, but they have to lead to a job. So at the end of the day, my last request for those folks are that how do we partner these companies up with these different entities to make sure that when somebody goes through a program or goes through a community college or whatever it might be, there's actually a job there waiting for them because they've learned the process or the curriculum of that company and move right into that job.
And that's a net win for everybody, right? If somebody's got a job waiting for them that helps them offset whatever they paid for their education. But Secretary Raimondo, I mean, you're a former governor. Secretary Cardona is a former education commissioner. Secretary Walsh is a former mayor. The fact is, these companies that you deal with as the Secretary of Commerce, they need these workers. That's an imperative. Right now, we're having a bit of a push and pull in this country about wages. We're seeing wages actually creep up a little bit. Your administration, the Biden administration, wanted to increase wages as part of the Recovery Act. That didn't happen, but there was actually a counter proposal by Senators Romney and Cotton, I think, for a $10 an hour minimum wage, which leads me to believe everybody thinks our minimum wage or our wages in this country need to be higher than they are right now.
No question about it. And you saw in the jobs report on Friday, you saw a bit of a lift in wages, and that's good news. But let me just say this. I, of course, support the president at $15 for the minimum wage. Even at $15 an hour, even if you're lucky to get 40 hours a week, it's tough to live. $15 an hour,
$30,000 a year,
40 hours a week, you're married, you have a couple kids to take care of, you are not getting by. So what we're talking about here is helping everybody to get the skills they need so they could get, as I referenced the young man who I got to know in Rhode Island, a quote-unquote real job. How about a job at $20, $30, $40, $50 an hour plus benefits and an opportunity to advance? That it can happen if we, provide these opportunities for people to get the skills they need. I also wanted to pick up on a comment that Secretary Walsh made around equity, which is vital. We can't just provide the curriculum and the courses in the community college, because some folks who need more support won't finish these training programs unless we provide the support. So, for example, if you don't have a job, you probably don't have a car, which means you need reliable transportation to get to your job training courses on a daily basis. If you have small children, you can't leave them home alone to go to your classes. So you need a hand with childcare. And we learned that in Rhode Island, that when we put support services around folks so that they could reliably show up every single day for their job training classes, and by the way, you guaranteed them a job at the end if they were successful in completing the classes, you'd be surprised that, our graduation rate in these job training courses went through the roof, and then everyone got the job. So it might seem expensive to provide free transportation, some childcare, and other support, but it's necessary. If we're going to get folks who have been left behind for so long these skills, we have to provide the support as well as the job training.
And most other developed countries have figured this out, that's a worthy expense, because when you get to the problem we've got where you can't get more people into the workforce, especially after a damaging few years in immigration, you've got to squeeze every drop of lemon that you can. You've got to make it really easy for people to work. Secretary Cardona, what have we learned that doesn't work in this country? I mean, one of the things I've observed is that there's job training around the country, but boy, is it siloed. It's not clear to everybody, wherever they are, how they get from A to B if they want better employment, or as you have all described, good work, as opposed to formalizing the language of job retraining. What do we need to dispense with, and what do we need to do more of?
We've created barriers where they don't need to exist. We've created large gaps where they don't need to exist. So if you look at it from the perspective of the consumer, the student, or the underemployed adult that's looking to get back in, we have too many siloed systems that are not talking to one another. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to bridge those gaps and make sure that we're making it clear so that if you're a high school student and you're thinking about something, you could take a path. If you're an underemployed adult in that community, we want to make sure that our buildings are not shutting off their lights at 3 o'clock when we have great CTE labs available for a second shift. Right? So we got to work smarter, not necessarily harder, but just smarter about making sure that we're working together and we're communicating with one voice to the families that we serve. We all serve the same families in different areas, but we need to remove these silos. And this is a great opportunity post-pandemic to reimagine what it could look like. So again, I'm excited about this opportunity to build it the way we think it should be built and not go back to a system that didn't work for some.
And Secretary Walsh, that's probably the most common question I get when I travel across the country and speak to people who feel that they're underemployed. They don't really know how to get to the next place. They don't know what that involves. Sometimes it may be very basic stuff. Sometimes it may be skills retraining. How do we get into a culture where everybody's able to think about moving up that ladder? Everybody understands and is able to practice upward mobility.
First and foremost, I think we have to do a lot better job of letting people know what's available. And that's one of the things that I experienced here in the city and when I was a legislator as well. Not everyone understands that a program or a job training opportunity is there for them, I think, first and foremost. And number two, putting confidence back in people that you have an opportunity to get into the middle class. You have an opportunity to have a job. You should have a job that earns good wages and allows you the opportunity to get into the middle class. And I think that as we think about rolling out some of this money from the AJP, it's really going to be incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we get down to the local level and the local elected officials and the local county managers and town people really make a concerted effort to let people know the opportunities that are available for them. Companies are looking for people every day. They want people trained. They want people skilled. They don't even have to be skilled with PhDs. They want them to be able to do the job in front of them. And we need to do a better job as government to let people know what's available.
What Secretary Raimondo said is true. This is a big deal that we're having this conversation with the three of you. I was very excited to learn that you were all coming together, and I think we should have this conversation many times over. Secretary Walsh, you've already joined me on my show. Secretaries Cardona and Raimondo, I invite you now to come and keep having this conversation, because it is actually the most important conversation that people can have. We think we can only talk about politics, but in fact, this is the thing that matters to everybody, the ability to have a good job that makes you proud of what you do, and that allows you to put the food on the table and educate your children and pay for your housing. So I'm grateful to you all for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.